thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Welcome to Drake University. We are delighted to host the talk this evening by Sister Helen. And I want to express our thanks to Michael Eagle and the Des Moines Metro Opera for including us in an exciting series of events that's leading up to the opening of their production of Dead Man Walking on June 28th. Tonight's event is a compelling manifestation of two themes that are critically important to the essence of who we are at Drake University. The first is that we recognize, and that we have recognized for 133 years, that we cannot provide the exceptional learning environment that is promised in our mission statement by ourselves. That promise, that our success in keeping that promise requires the support, the engagement, and the guidance of others, from individuals to organizations to the community as a whole. And these collaborations enable us to do what we do at the highest level, and at the same time enable us to contribute to the ongoing health and vitality of our community. So in this context, it's really exciting and very appropriate for us to be part of a constellation of events that includes not only the Des Moines Metro Opera, but Fleur Cinema, Grandview University, the Des Moines Arts Center, Simpson College, and the many distinguished panelists that will be back here at Drake on June 4th for a symposium. And the second theme is, as I think many of you, as I look around this audience, many of you have heard me say, emphasize repeatedly, is the role of the university in a civil society. The role of the university is a place where people come together, where the community comes together in an atmosphere of mutual respect and civility to explore and debate the important issues of the day. This commitment to serving the public good through informed inquiry and healthy, respectful debate is at the heart of who we are as a university. So again, thank you to the Des Moines Metro Opera and to all of you here this evening for creating this opportunity for Drake to serve the public good with a focus on one of the most important and contentious issues of our time, an issue that has unfortunately been very much in the public consciousness over the past week as a result of the horrific episode in Oklahoma. We are honored to host Sister Helen and to welcome you all here this evening, and it is now my pleasure to introduce Michael Eagle, General and Artistic Director of the Des Moines Metro Opera. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, David, and thank you for hosting us on your beautiful campus this evening. It's such a nice night. It might be nice to just do this outside on the campus grounds, but I'm very appreciative of this wonderful space and for your efforts at co-hosting us for tonight's event. When we approached the President's office about this idea for the event, there was absolutely no hesitation in agreeing to work with us and to provide this event to the community. I think it's just one of the many indicators, as the President said, of the important role that Drake University has played in our community and across a broad spectrum of disciplines and collaborations. As David said, my name is Michael Eagle, and I am the General and Artistic Director for Des Moines Metro Opera. It's my pleasure to welcome you here for one of the major focal points of a series of events that we're calling Staging Connections that will lead up to our opening night performance of Dead Man Walking on June 28th as a part of our 2014 summer festival season. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't begin tonight by saying a big thank you to our sponsor for the Staging Connections series, Weinhardt & Logan PC. This is our fourth in a series of events in this series that they have sponsored. I don't think it's very often that we have a story of an opera or a plot that offers us the opportunity as an opera company to engage in the community the way that this has, and that this subject with such deep moral and societal implications has provided us through this series. As the President mentioned, given the news out of Oklahoma this last week, this subject remains as timely as ever. And so we are definitely very grateful to Weinhardt & Logan for enabling us to make the most of these opportunities that the story provides us in our community. The next event in this series is a legal panel entitled The American Death Penalty as Reflected in the Opera Dead Man Walking, organized by my collaborator David McCord from the Drake University Law School. On June 4th, we will have a panel discussion featuring musical excerpts from the opera as performed by our principal cast, and a wonderful panel of experts on this subject, including the last trial lawyer to litigate a death penalty case in Iowa. If you are a legal professional, maybe the best news of all, and I will tell you, is that this event is offered for CLE credit free of charge. So we hope to see many members of the State Bar Association here on June 4th. Finally, the composer of the opera, Jake Heggie, will be in residence with us on opening day, which will include a 1:30 p.m. performance at the Temple for the Performing Arts Temple Theater with excerpts of his songs and other operas. Many of you may be aware that Jake Heggie is the composer of the opera Moby Dick, which was recently seen on PBS, commissioned by the Dallas Opera, and has enjoyed a very extraordinary success, paralleling that of his early opera, Dead Man Walking. He will then be with us also for opening night that night on June 28th. It's a rare opportunity, I think, for artists and audiences in this field to have a living opera composer present for the performance of his or her music, and so we count ourselves very fortunate to have one of America's preeminent living opera composers here in Des Moines on June 28th. It's been wonderful for us as we prepare this opera to be able to pick up the phone or send an email to Jake Heggie and ask him questions about this opera and how he sees it being produced. If anybody has an email address for Mozart or Verdi, we would love to have that as well. I'd also like to mention that the production sponsor this season for Dead Man Walking is Frank R. Brownell. Des Moines Metro Opera has a long commitment to presenting contemporary operas written in English in the 20th century. When I began as artistic director in 2010, I knew that the time had come that we begin to include works from the 21st century as well. I also knew that Dead Man Walking was exactly the piece with which to begin that initiative. Commissioned by the San Francisco Opera in the year 2000, the opera has gone on to be one of the most often performed new works of the 21st century. It has seen over 40 new productions, maybe close to 50 now in these last couple of months, around the world in those 14 years since its premiere. And we are delighted to present the Iowa premiere of it this summer. I'm sure there isn't anybody in this room, as I look out across the room, that has yet to purchase a ticket to attend this performance. On the off chance that you are one of those people that may not have purchased a ticket, on the very back of your program is an order form that you can begin to fill out and drop off in the back corner of the room there as you leave. Dennis Hendrickson and the staff there will be wonderfully happy to accept your ticket order for Dead Man Walking. We have 5 performances, and they will fill up very quickly, so don't delay in reserving your tickets. Following the opera, we will have Sister Helen will be available for a book signing in the other side of the room. If you brought your book, she will be happy to sign those. If you haven't got one yet, you can purchase them in the back of the room. 100% of the proceeds for tonight's book sales will go to the Ministry Against the Death Penalty. We're very happy to have that arrangement with that program. I should also say here that there will be an opportunity for question and answers following tonight's talk. If you would like to ask a question of Sister Helen, we will form lines here where you see the microphones, and we'll have people attending those microphones to help you facilitate that question and answer. Your program contains the biography of tonight's speaker. In 1982, Sister Helen Prejean became the spiritual advisor to Patrick Saunier, convicted killer of 2 teenagers who was sentenced to die in the electric chair of Louisiana's Angola State Prison. In the months before Saunier's death, the Roman Catholic nun came to know a man who was as terrified as he had once been terrifying. At the same time, she also came to know the families of the victims and the men whose job it was to execute him, men who often harbored doubts about the rightness of what they were doing. Out of that dreadful intimacy came a profoundly moving spiritual journey through our system of capital punishment, confronting both the plight of the condemned and the rage of the bereaved, the needs of a crime-ridden society, and the Christian imperative of love. Her story was turned into the national best-selling book and an award-winning film in 1998 starring Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, and is now one of the world's most popular new operas. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming to the stage Sister Helen Prejean.
I try when I can to get into audiences to begin to tell about the story so that you can, because it's a new opera. And like you don't get to meet Madam Butterfly. But here I am, and I want to share with you this story. The core of this is really expressed in the aria of Sister Helen, the Sister Helen of the opera, My Journey. And it's so tuneful. Jake Hagee, accessible artist that makes music that we can hum in the shower. And that was the first thing I said to him, by the way, when I heard they were going to do an opera. And so I meet the composer. I said, Jake, we're not going to have one of them modern 8-tonal things when you come out and you can't even hum a tune. And he goes, oh, no, Sister Helen, I write for the human voice, and it's going to be accessible, I promise you. And I said to him, because, see, when you turn your work over to an artist, you got to trust them. I mean, and you got to give them complete freedom to be an artist and do with it and what they're going to do. And I said, if you do these two things, that we have music that's accessible, and you keep the theme in it, it's a journey of redemption for everybody in it. And he goes, Sister Helen, you got it. And so the aria of Sister Helen, who's on a journey, as are we all, as we descend into all the deep moral issues of our time. And it's soulful. It's like, my journey to the truth, my journey. And I am on a journey. And as Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins love to say, well, here was a nun in over her head, which I was. I had never done anything like this before. And I'll tell you a little bit of the core of the story. And as I tell the story, I'll be bringing in how the opera is a perfect way to bring you close into it, not only with drama, because live drama, as we well know from stage plays, bring you into something, and it's live, and you're in it, but with music. And one description of music I've heard is that music instructs and guides the emotions of the heart. And believe me, this opera is going to take you to every chasm of your heart that maybe you didn't know you had. I'm not speaking in the mic.
You're doing okay here. We're just going to move it down a little bit. How's that?
If I'm doing so okay, why are you moving it? So affirming. I also come from New Orleans, and I'm Cajun, so here we go. And so the core of the story is this incredible journey, getting into something I never dreamed I was going to do. I'm a Roman Catholic nun. I taught kids at Cabrini School in New Orleans. I wasn't one of those ruler-slapping nuns. God is love, whap, whap, whap. And I loved the kids. I taught middle school and loved teaching 8th grade boys English grammar, because it's what you call a challenge. And I've loved everything I've done, actually, but I wasn't engaged in some of the big political debates or the issues of the time outside my little world, which was Cabrini Parish, growing up in a Catholic family. I'm writing now my spiritual journey, the prequel to Dead Man Walking, to the book of Dead Man Walking. And the spiritual journey that brought me to this place in more depth than I'm going to be able to tell you tonight. And it was all a surprise. I mean, I think the spiritual life opens us into dimensions of life. It's always surprising. And when enlightenment comes and we get it, and we really get it, and then when passion comes, it's one of the greatest graces of our lives, that our little boat is going to catch a wave, and we're going to start riding that wave, and the wind is going to be whistling through our hair, and every part of us is going to come alive in the doing of it so that we can be part of something to help life to come in the world and for mercy to come in the world and compassion. As the Buddhists know so well, compassion for all beings, compassion, but it's at the heart of every spiritual tradition. And so the awakening came through a debate and discussion in the nuns in New Orleans in the early 80s. What should we as religious sisters in the United States be doing? Because the civil rights movement had happened, and, you know, we were being good nuns. We were prayerful. I was very prayerful, which I'm sure you can tell. But mainly, I was so in that the spiritual world that if I prayed hard enough, that was going to be what changed the world. That it was going to take God to change the world, all these horrendous problems. So I prayed, and I worked in my, you know, with the children that I was teaching and in the community where I was. And I thought the Christian life basically called us to be, well, nice, charitable to people around us. But I didn't get it about poor people. I didn't get it about the big struggles of justice. I didn't get it about the inner city of New Orleans, which now the 90% of all the violence is young black men killing other black men in our city. I didn't get it. I was separated from it. And that's what culture does. I didn't get it when I grew up as a young girl in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it was the days of art segregation. African-American people couldn't drink at a water fountain with us. In Sacred Heart Church, African-American people had to sit over in a special section reserved for black people. Couldn't mix with whites. When we had our first Holy Communion, which symbolizes the union of the body of Christ, all of us together, black kids had to make their Holy Communion separate. And I never questioned it. And what culture does is it says, well, honey, that's the way things need to be here. It's better for the races to be separated. And everybody's saying that. Your mom and daddy's saying that. The priest is saying that. Everybody's saying that. This is the best thing for us to do. So when I awakened that the gospel of Jesus is very, very radical in terms of that it was calling me to stand in solidarity with the poorest and most marginated. There's hardly a word that comes out of Pope Francis's mouth now that is not in that direction. That we're meant to get out of ourselves and we're meant to transform the world, so we got to go to where the biggest problems are. And that had never attracted me too much. I thought, well, those people interested in social justice, let them go do social justice. But me, I'm apolitical. I'm spiritual. I don't get involved in those political things, those political debates. And the awakening that the gospel is to be on the side of justice and the poor awakened me, changed the spiritual trajectory of my life, led me to go live in the St. Thomas housing projects, which is where the whole journey opens up. Because here I was living in the apex of white privilege, and now I am with people who are poor, people who are black. The kids in the public school could get to junior year in high school and couldn't read a third grade reader. Everybody had a problem with the police, and when I did research for Dead Man, I found out that the majority, most of the complaints to the Justice Department about police brutality in New Orleans were from New Orleans. And I was living in the suburbs, and it could have been in Calcutta. Because there's a way we can just live separate. It's not that we bad people. It's not that we grow up and just say, I want to be racist and I want to be callous to the poor. But it's just where we grow up and who we're with, what tidal pool we're in, who we go to lunch with, who we're talking to, what movies we see. So the awakening was huge for me. And so when I go into the St. Thomas Housing Project, I began to sit at the feet of the people, so African-American people who had been my servants when I was growing up. I didn't even know Ellen and Jesse's last name. Ellen worked in the house with Mama, just like that book, To Help. She worked in the house with Mom, and Jesse worked in the yard. And Mom and Daddy were always kind, but never questioned the system because it wasn't in the consciousness. So when consciousness begins to break open and the discourse begins to happen, then that's when things begin to change. And so the African-American people are teaching me. And I'm learning. I'm beginning to keep a journal. That's when I learned to write. I worked with a man from the Times-Picayune. We started a small newspaper called Flambeau. The Mardi Gras parades are led by an African-American person who carries a torch or a flambeau, and we called it a Catholic Voice for Justice. And so I began to learn how to write. You show, you don't tell. You don't hang labels on people and put all these adjectives and adverbs, said that lily white racist stuff. You tell stories of people and you show their faces and you get in there with people. And so then it was just really quick that one day I got an invitation to write a man on death row. And I didn't know they were going to kill this person. It was in the early 80s. We hadn't had an execution in 20 years. There'd been an unofficial moratorium across the United States, starting in the 60s, all through the 70s. I hadn't even noticed that the Supreme Court put the death penalty back in 76. I wasn't following the Supreme Court or what they were doing. So I write this man on death row. And you're going to see this story in the opera. You're going to see the invitation to the, hey, what are you doing? And Sister Rose, who represents the sisterhood and the way we sisters are with each other, helping each other, challenging each other. And there I am now, and she's saying, be careful, Helen. Be careful, Helen. This man is a terrible murderer, and you don't know anything about this. Be careful. And so Elise, who's me, you're going to see her. She's on stage the whole first act, because as she's driving to this prison, she is singing and expressing all her questions, everything, as she's going to the prison, which happened to me. And so then I visit the man I'm writing the letters to, one of the scariest experiences I ever had in my life, because you see, those that we have put on death row, we have categorized as the worst of the worst among us. And when you come out for a visit, they're in a belt around their waist with handcuffs. They have on leg irons. They're in a place called death row. And then they're brought out shackled by a guard, locked in a room with a heavy mesh screen between it to protect the visitor. You're locked in a room too. And that was the first visit. And so the experience is one of increasingly, oh my God, he's a human being. And I looked into his eyes, and he was human. And it was a tussle. He had to learn to trust me. Here's a nun coming to visit him. Just my luck, I get a nun. Which you must know has been an ongoing theme in this thing of doing art, of Dead Man Walking. The movie, that when Tim Robbins was sending the screenplay out to Hollywood producers, and they'd call Tim. They get up to the second highest rung of decision making about whether or not they're going to do the movie, and they go, well, Tim, it's got no romantic element in it. This is heavy, man. This is heavy. Dead Man Walking. Who's going to go on their first date and go see a movie? Let's go see Dead Man Walking. And then you got a nun. Now, of course, Hollywood, it's every one of them that he sent it to at the second highest level said, now, you let us, spice it up between the death row inmate and a nun. We might have us a movie. And Tim Robbins, who is a wonderful, bold, courageous artist, said it's not about spicing it up between the death row inmate and the nun. This is a story of a journey to redemption. Susan Sarandon always has talked about the story as a different kind of love story, which it is. And you're going to experience love that happens in the course of this encounter and this journey together. And so the journey begins, and I begin to visit him, and then I found out about the crime. It was unspeakable. I didn't know when I first met him what he had done. I know if you're on death row, you're a murderer. I'd never met a murderer before. I don't know what I know murderers murder, but I didn't know who he killed. And then I found out that he and his brother had actually killed a young teenage couple who had gone to like a local lover's lane to park near a sugarcane field in one of the little southern towns in Louisiana. And they were in the field rabbit hunting with guns, and they see the kids drive up. And one thing quickly led to another. And so they were out to rape the girl, but then in the process of it, whatever happened, and bang, 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 bang. Bullets to the back of the head of two kids lying down, absolutely defenseless, killed execution style. And a 17-year-old boy is dead, and an 18-year-old girl is dead, and their parents then begin their journey. You get up in the morning, and it's an ordinary day, and the theme when the victim's parents are singing, and then one night, everything changed. And I was just getting into this. I was just meeting a man. I didn't know what to do. I really was in over my head. And when it came to the victim's family, of course, my heart went to them. And I just thought, well, I ought to try to do something for them. And then I made a terrible mistake. It's probably the worst mistake of my life. Because I didn't do anything. I thought, they're not going to want to see me. I'm the spiritual advisor to the ones who kill their kids. I'm the last person in the world they're going to see. And you know, in the culture of the death penalty, like in Louisiana, where most of the people, like 85% in the 80s, were supportive of the death penalty, everybody is for the death penalty. And so victims' families get caught in that current. And if they're not for the death penalty, the ultimate penalty for the ultimate loss of their beloved child, then they're dishonoring their child. How can you not be for the death penalty when you've had this kind of loss? This kind of ultimate loss where you can never get your child back. How can you not be for the death penalty? And it becomes a seesaw very easily then. Whoever is against the death penalty is your enemy and must be against you. I didn't write them a note, I didn't do anything. And I met them at the worst possible time you could meet a victim's family, because it was a week before Patrick Saunier was executed, and it was a pardon board meeting. And that's the last public act before an execution, and you sign a book when you go into the pardon board meeting, which side you're on. And it's literally like going in a Roman Coliseum. Are you for life? You sign this side of the book. You want the prisoner to be able to live, you sign over here. If you're calling for the death penalty and you think he ought to die, you sign over here. I'm with 3 people in a very crowded room about like this, that's on the side of to ask the pardon board for him not to die. And that was when I met the boy's parents, the Leblancs who lost David, and the Bourques who lost Loretta, their 18-year-old daughter. And we were walking outside the building while the pardon board was voting, and I rounded a corner, and I ran right into them. They were walking toward me. I couldn't escape them. And the opera captures this. They capture the confrontation. They capture their anguish and their pain. They capture me, having done it all wrong. And they just are, and the tension's real, the anguish is real, the anger's real, and the rage is real. And I'm out of my depth. And all I can say is, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it was that encounter with them and seeing their anguish. One of the families rejected me completely. I deserved it, and they've been angry with me ever since in the family. I had done it all wrong. At least to write a note and say, I am so sorry about the loss of your child. I did nothing. And the other family, the Leblanc family, had lost their son. The father comes right up to me. He's the hero of this book, actually, because he's the man who shows us the path to redemption and healing when you've had the ultimate loss like this. And he goes, Sister Helen, all this time you've been visiting those two brothers, and you never once came to see us. Sister, I've had nobody to talk to. You can't believe the pressure on us to be for the death penalty. Well, I didn't know victims' families wanted any pressure. I thought any victim's family, given the chance, is going to go for the death penalty. That's the way you express, isn't it? That's what the DAs say in closing arguments at trials. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, look at this family. They are never going to see their daughter graduate from college. They are never going to be able to experience the joy of their grandchildren. And he is the one who did it. He broke the law. He needs to suffer the full consequences of breaking the law. And I want to ask you, when you go in there to vote, to do justice for this family. And I meet them. And so here's this father saying, Sister, where you been? I've had nobody to talk to. You can't believe the pressure. And his story is told in depth in this book. He's the first victim's family member I met who brought me into his heart and into his journey and showed me how he found the path, a way out of the vengeance and the rage and into a path of compassion and forgiveness. He said, Sister, people think forgiveness is weak. Like, oh, you killed my son, I'll forgive you. They think it means you condone what they did. Well, like forgive and forget. It's okay, you killed my son. And the crux of his story, which is it's caught, the beginning of his journey is caught in this, in Mr. Hart, who has it out with me in many, many ways. You know, don't you believe the person who killed our child deserves to die for what he did? And I'm saying something about Christ, and he said, don't give me Christ, give me Helen Prejean. And so I go, I'm just trying to get there, Mr. Hart, but and he goes, well, may that same Lord and Savior forgive you for your poor, misguided heart. And it's a confrontation, and there's sparks in the air. And I'm totally thrown, know that I did it wrong, and then trying to make my way. In the real story, Lloyd LeBlanc is the teacher for me and brings me through the journey. And he said, Sister, everybody was saying to me, Lloyd, you got to be for the death penalty or it looked like you didn't love David. It looked like you didn't love your son. Everybody was saying that to me. I couldn't hear it in church either. Eula and I would go to Mass in different churches, see if there would be a priest who would talk about the gospel of Jesus, and that Jesus had said, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye. But I say to you, and the path out of it through wholeness and love and forgiveness. And we couldn't hear it anywhere. And sister, you weren't there for us either. And so he said, with everybody saying that to me, he said, I went there. I went there. I said, they're right. I wish I could pull the switch. I wish both of the brothers had gotten a death penalty. And in my mind, I started pulling that switch on them and seeing them experience the pain as they had inflicted pain on my poor wife, who's been in a sea of tears for 3 years. I thought I was going to lose Eula, thought I was going to lose her from the death of David. And he said, I went there. And then he said, I started noticing I was like angry all the time. I'm short-tempered with everybody. And I've always been a kind person. You know, when I grew up as a child, I loved to help people. I've always loved to help people. That's when I'm happiest, when I'm helping people. And I'm good with my hands. Sister, when you come to my house, you're going to see lawnmowers and cars. Hey, Lloyd, can you fix this? Hey, Lloyd, can you fix that? And he said, if I'm on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's broken down on the side of the road, I'm going to stop and help them because that's who I am. And I was losing it. I was losing all of it. And he reached a point, and he said to me, and then, sister, I came to understand. I came to a point, and he put his hand like this when he told me this. And then I said, They killed our son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. And then he began to set his face to go down another road. The road of forgiveness, which I discovered in him, because I'd never experienced anything like this before. I'd never lost a loved one to such terrible violence and had to make my way out of that crucible of chaos and rage and turmoil. I totally get it, that the first stage that almost every family goes through is mothers will say, I would like to put my hands around the throat of that person that killed my child and squeeze the life out of them with my own bare hands. And anger in the beginning of the process, I get it. I get it. Or the way victims' families get caught up in where we have the death penalty and you see them coming out of a courtroom and they're doing victory. We won. We won. He got the death penalty. And then their journey begins. The waiting, 10 years, 15 years. And finally, what are they promised at the end? What are they promised? Well, now when it's time, the state is going to be the one to execute him, and you're going to send representatives, and you will get to witness as we do justice for your dead child. That is the reality of what is promised to them. And there's a place in the opera where Mr. Hart sings, as we're duking it out, finally, I know my pain is about my son's death, not his death. Or Bud Welch, who lost his daughter Julie in the Oklahoma City bombing in Oklahoma, who said, even if I could have attended the execution of Timothy McVeigh, who killed 168 people, our Julie among them that morning in the Murrah building. He said, even when I came home from the execution, the chair where Julie sat would still be empty. But the journey of heart and mind and soul that is in that. And Lloyd Leblanc was the first one to take me there. And he was the first one to teach me that what it's about is that forgiveness is not first and foremost relieving the burden of the one who has caused us great harm. It's about saving your own life and not letting the love and integrity that is part of who we are be sacrificed forever and lost to feelings of hatred and anger and rage. And there is a part of the opera, and I want to bring you to Jake now, the composer. And when he came to this, as he's composing the opera, Terrence McNally lives in Florida. He's the librettist. He's writing the drama. Terrence had never written a libretto for an opera before. He's a playwright. Jake had never written an opera before. He was the PR guy in San Francisco, and he began to write music for the human voice. Lotfi Mansouri, who was the director, decides, I want a millennial piece, something for the new millennium. And he talked to Jake about, Jake, I think you could do it. I've seen what you've written for the human voice. He was writing a lot of songs for Frederica von Stade and other people. And he said, you know, the most developed musical instrument is the human voice. And he also taught me that as good as an opera singer is, when they're in their 20s as they begin, the last organ in the body to fully develop are the vocal cords. And it's only when you're in your mid-30s that you can reach full voice. So he said, I want you to get together with Terrence McNally, and I'd like for you to write an opera for the millennial year. And he was talking to Jake about something nice and light and bubbly. And so Jake and Terrence meet. And so Jake's thinking light, bubbly, millennium, new hope in the new year, and meets with Jake. And it was some French thing. I don't even know the name of it, light and bubbly and all. Terrence goes, no, Jake, we're not doing that. So it's like bringing them together in a little petri dish. Then they separated. So Lotfi gave them a few months. And then he wanted to call them together again. And this creative process that makes art is so fascinating. I mean, it's the way things happen. It's the way this book got written. It's the way operas get written. It's the way films are done. It's the way plays are done. And in the separation, Terrence McNally had seen the movie A Dead Man Walking. He got the book. And so on the plane, going to meet with Jake for their second meeting, moving up from bubbly, he had a list of 10 possibilities. But in his own mind, he had thought, if Jake doesn't go for Dead Man, I'm not doing any of the others. This is the only one that I think will have all the resonance in it and deep themes in it that I wanted. And then Jake says, when Terrence said, okay, I have this list, I'm going to read them to you. And the minute he said, Dead Man Walking, Jake talks about the hairs on his neck standing on end, and music started coming into his head. He could hear the clang of metal bars. He could hear the harsh part of it. He could hear the tenderness in it, the anguish in it. It all just started coming in. And they wrote the opera in an amazingly short time. The first act was done in 6 weeks. And Jake would go to Florida, and the two men would write. And Terrence McNally said, this is an American opera. So it's going to be spoken in English, like American. And it has all kinds of music in it. It's got rock and roll. And Jake's real proud. He wrote the little rock and roll song that's on the radio. He said, Helen, my first rock and roll song. It's got this resonant spiritual in it. God will gather us around. And it is amazingly brave and courageous in the opera, because in the prologue, we are going to be plunged into the violence. And he has us witness and go through the killing of the young people. Everything else is going to uncoil out of that. And the contrasting scene right after we see that is me with the kids in St. Thomas and with Sister Rose at the piano, and all the children are clapping and singing, God will gather us around, all around, father and mother, sister and brother, and we have just watched the greatest separation of human life that could be possible. And so then the journey begins. And when Jake came to the part about the victims' families and how he was going to express it, he called me. He said, Helen, I think I have the heart of the opera. And he made me a little tape of it. I mean, he plinked it out on the piano, just him, and he's singing the lines. He sent me the words. He said, the heart of the opera is here. And he was all excited about it. And he said, Helen, the victim's family, it's a sextet. It's a medley. And the theme is, you don't know what it's like. So the victim's family, and I'm in the middle, mostly saying, I'm sorry. But they are singing, you don't know what it's like to see your child go out the door, not knowing it's the last time you will see them alive. You don't know what it's like then. The last words you say are, clean your room, shut the door. Non-consequential things. In the actual stories in Dead Man Walking, you will hear Elizabeth Harvey talk about her daughter Faith going out the door that night on a date. And the last thing she said to her was, honey, the hem's out of your skirt. Here, let's get a pin and pin up your hem. And she's out the door, and she's gone. And then one night, and then one night. And so they're singing, and I mean, he brings the music together. It's going to bring your heart to places. And I'm going, I'm sorry, and then he does something in the opera that Tim Robbins did not do in the movie. The mother of Joseph DeRocher is there singing. You don't know what it's like to see your child slip through your hands. You don't know what it's like to lose your son. And the most dramatic scene for her is when there's this pardon board hearing where both sides are going to speak for life or for death. This poor mother, uneducated, never spoken on a microphone in her life, never appeared in public, is being called to say the words to these appointees of the governor to persuade them not to kill her boy. And Terrence had the genius in it to see this mother. Well, what about this mother and her story? Frederica von Stade did it in San Francisco. And there she is before the pardon board going, is this what I'm talking to? Well, I have some words here. Sister Helen, help me. And she begins to sing about her Joe, but don't kill my Joe. Don't kill my Joe. And then as she's talking about her son and how he helps his big brothers and how with his own money he bought her the tortoise comb for her birthday, and a good boy who buys his mother a comb like this can't be a bad boy. He did a terrible thing. But my son Joe. And as she comes to the end, the victim's family, Mr. Hart can't contain himself anymore. And he just breaks in and he goes, this is the one who killed our son or our daughter and stabbed her over and over and over. And he brings right the pain of the victim's families and cuts her off. And then they help her to her chair and help her recover a bit. But she sings before she goes, I know what my Joe did is such a terrible thing, and that if I were that father, I would want to see him die too. And then she proceeds to say, don't kill our Joe. And one of the most moving scenes is going to be before the death of Joe, that his mother is there. I have witnessed this. 6 times I have accompanied human beings to execution at the hands of the state. 6 times I have been with the mothers whose sons did the terrible deed and whose son is going to be dead before the night is out, not killed by a bullet, but dead, and there's going to be a funeral, and she's about to lose her child too. And that scene where he visits with his mother and his brothers for the last time is part of the story too. And you have to understand that when we're going to see the crime, we are not going to like Joe DeRocher. He doesn't take responsibility for what he did. He denies it. He's tough. He's not owning it. He's brash. He fights me off during the whole first visits. And he's making his way to the truth. And there's a crucial scene in there where, of course, I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm just in there with him, and here's a man who keeps denying what he did and denying what he did. And then there's a little where I say to him, and this actually happened with a man on death row in Louisiana, Robert Lee Willie. I said, Robert, you ever read the words of Jesus in there about that the truth will set you free? The truth will set you free. And then they begin to sing it together, and she says, the truth will set you free. And he goes, I like that. The truth will set you free. And she says, sing it again, Joe. And they begin to sing, the truth will set you free. But he is nowhere near the truth or acknowledging what he did. And so the whole story then unfolds. And we see justice done, the ultimate justice that the state calls for. There's no doubt about his guilt. We don't use any energy saying, did he do it or not, like a whodunit. And if he's guilty, well, he deserves to die. We know he's guilty. And working our way then to, okay, he deserves to die, so bring it on. And this is the power of art. And they do bring it on. And the opera is going to show. It's the only opera written with a minute and a half of silence. Because when the execution happens, all we hear is the whir and buzz of the machines delivering into his veins the lethal solution that is going to cause his death. So how are you going to end an opera like this? Good question, right? And you know what I'm going to do to you now. How can you possibly, what does Sister Helen, when she comes, there's his body, justice has been done. There's the thing with the victim's family that has gone on. Where do we go with that? And Jake and Terrence ended it, I think, in the only way it could be ended, which you get to experience for yourself. It's a deep journey. Not only Sister Helen, me is on a journey, we all are on a journey. Because we may not have experienced a murder, please God, in our family, but we know what hurt is, or we know what it means to have somebody we love hurt, and we know that rising up inside of us of the desire to get even and the desire to inflict some kind of pain or do to people what they've done to us. We know that. This is a universal story of hurt and loss and anguish and coming to a place where we can have a modicum of peace so that we can continue to live and our life is not sucked out of us by the enormity of the tragedy that has befallen us. So welcome to the journey, and I welcome now, we can just have open conversation, and afterwards I'll be very happy to sign the books for you. I just want you to know, y'all have heard of the Energizer Bunny nuns in the Catholic Church? You have heard. Well, anyway, this helps support our ministry to educate the public, and I stand here before you tonight because I got a lot of nuns holding me up who formed me, trained me, challenged me, brought me to the place where I am today, and we undertake this ministry together, and the proceeds from the books are going to help our ministry. So, with that little commercial done, okay. Is there a mic over there too? And here, just don't be shy. Just come on up.
Sister, a question over here.
Okay.
Appreciate your being here, and it was quite an interesting talk. David Brooks recently wrote an article in the New York Times about the life in solitary confinement, the dehumanizing of it, and so forth. What do you feel would be appropriate to the circumstance with respect to a person found guilty of the kind of crime that you experienced, or you were involved with?
We have signed the UN Convention Against Torture, and we should not be torturing our fellow human beings. And torture has a definition. It's an extreme mental or physical assault on someone rendered defenseless. And in the second book, Death of Innocence, where I talk about my dialogue with Pope John Paul, that was one of the questions I had for him. I said, Does a Catholic Church only uphold the dignity of innocent life when I'm walking with a man to execution and he's shackled hand and foot, made completely defenseless, and he's being brought across a room where he's going to be strapped down and killed, and he says, "Sister, please pray God holds up my legs"? There is no way that we can call the death penalty of a conscious, imaginative human being who anticipates his death and dies in his mind 1,000 times before he dies. That is not the experience of torture. Solitary confinement, life imprisonment of young people, sentencing young people to prison, to death in prison, young people. All of these are forms, and once you have death as the apex of this whole system, you can do anything to people. Because to have a Supreme Court of the United States that has made a decision that to take a conscious person and hold them in imprisonment for years and take them out and kill them, it is not cruel to take a person and kill them, is going to allow everything else. So you have life imprisonment. So you have massive incarceration of people of color because you made drugs a felony. And you get a felony and you get out and you can never get a job and you can't get public assistance and you're permanently substrated into society and you can never get out again. You can't vote in some states ever. So all the prison system comes out of a mindset. And the mindset is we need to be very afraid of these people. We need to lock them up and throw away the key. And we want them to suffer. It's punitive. We want them to suffer for what they did. And you even hear the argument with the death penalty, because they killed, we're going to imitate them, so we have to kill them. All of that is part of a way of thinking that is separated from the humanity of who we really are. We are the highest incarcerator in the world. My state, Louisiana, is the highest incarcerator of the states. And God bless Iowa. Y'all have had the sense, the goodness in the hearts of the people to recognize that you do not want to make your government or give the government to be the arbitrator of life and death and deciding who ought to die. The studies they've done of solitary confinement, we are dialogical beings. We exist by being with. And the studies they've done even of people's brains, when you are alone, you never have conversations or encounter with other human beings, your brain begins to deteriorate. Doesn't take long before you can't read, you can't look at TV, because we're meant to be with each other. And it's cruelty. But all that cruelty happens, I want to say, because the ultimate cruelty is allowed, that we can decide who among us is the worst who needs to die. I just want to tell you, it's changing. Minds and hearts are changing in the United States, and there was a poll done recently with millennials, young people born from 80 to on, who identify themselves as Christians. And a little side comment here, the churches have not done too well on this issue, including my own Catholic church. I mean, I was waiting for the bishops to stand up. I'm waiting for the priests to stand up. I'm waiting for the teaching of the people. Nothing. Nothing. And back to the Energizer Bunny nuns. But so you get out there because your eyes have seen and you've been changed. And so these millennials, was the question they were asked, and all the words in it are key. Government should have the option to execute the worst criminals. And 8 out of every 10 of those young people said, no, not anymore. You can't entrust that to government. And that's our young people. They've changed a lot of other things, too. Everybody's going to them, Nick. Do you feel bad? Oh, no, it's okay, Nick. It's not about you. Anybody want to come to Nick? He's got a microphone, too. Okay.
I'm prepared to ask you a real question.
Thank you, sir. With that introduction, I can't wait. This is a real question.
Not too many years ago, the governor of Illinois had started instituting genetic testing for a number of individuals, both on death row or long sentences. And the cardinal injustice that I see is that this new enlightenment that we had, it's almost close to 10 years ago now, faded away out of society's memory, and it was letting so many people out of the deepest of injustice. They were innocent and thrown in for the death penalty, and the proof came out over and over and over again in so many cases that they were not the guilty party. The ultimate, I cannot imagine being thrown into jail and actually truly being innocent under those circumstances. What happened to our societal memory? What kind of cardinal, or where were the cardinals in your discussion, and for that matter, the Pope and all the rest, or any of the authority figures that we have in society? Why isn't it not mandatory that these genetic tests that can prove innocence absolute, instead of this absolute desire for bloodlust that most families don't get satisfaction from anyway? I mean, I really don't understand this forgetfulness in society, and I want to ask you, how can we reinvigorate?
That is a real question. That's a good question. And in Death of Innocence, I give you the structural reason. I'm now with the 7th person on death row. 3 of them have been absolutely innocent. And then the structural reason for it is it's all poor people. So they don't have defense to mount a real adversarial system. See, when you go to trial, it's supposed to be adversarial. Prosecution presents, defense presents. They're all poor. The other thing you got to know about DNA testing is it's only in 1 in every 4 homicides that they have the biological evidence. So it's not the magic bullet for everything, but it's got to be the system. How do we come to justice? What's the whole system for deciding that some people, as the Supreme Court, I hold them accountable in so many ways for this, because they gave an impossible guideline for us to follow. They said, only the worst of the worst murders are supposed to get the death penalty. Not your ordinary murders, not your garden variety murder. Worst of the worst. Nobody knows what that means. Because if my mother was killed, when a personal universe is lost that could never be replaced, that is the worst of the worst that could happen in there. And so it's in the hands of local DAs who have the discretionary power to go for the death penalty or not. Politics enters. In Louisiana, the man on death row now that I'm accompanying, Manuel Ortiz, the DA that got the death penalty for him when he ran for judge, he bragged about how many death penalties he got, and he said, I got Ortiz on death row. And Manuel Ortiz is from El Salvador, and he's innocent. How does it happen? Truth doesn't come out at trial. And the jury never hears it. And they don't hear the eyewitnesses. And they don't see the original police report because the DAs have charge of the forensic evidence. They have the police report. 90% of the 144 wrongfully convicted people who've gotten off a death row, it's because of prosecutorial misconduct. So there's pressure. There's like the murder of a policeman. Nobody's been caught. Randall Dale Adams, that came out in the film The Thin Blue Line. You're under pressure. The media's on you. That policeman was killed. A month has gone by in Dallas. Where's the one who did that? Aren't you supposed to be doing your job as DA? And you get somebody. And Randall Dale Adams was a drifter who happened to be around the scene where the policeman was killed, and they get him. And the film director saved his blooming life because he told him the story, and he started interviewing people and goes, my God, this guy's innocent. It is so broken. It is unbelievably broken. And because it's so removed from our eyes, and because we do not see the executions when they happen, we just think, well, justice was done, another person got their just punishment. And the killing of Clayton Lockett, You cannot believe how non-transparent the whole process has been of what states have been doing to kill our fellow human beings in executions. The veterinarians have more transparency about the drugs they use, the process, and the people who carry it out than the execution of human beings in the United States with lethal injection. And you go to Texas and you say, you try to get a court order, we want to know what drugs you're using and what's the source. And what happened about 5 or 6 years ago, the Danish company who was producing the main drug, which was an anesthetic, an anesthesia, found out that their drug was being used not for health, to help life. They found their drug was being used to execute people, and they cut off their drug. So now you can't get that drug. So they're all scurrying around. Where? They go into these things called compounding pharmaceutical companies who mix drugs together. And I mean, in Ohio, when they killed Dennis McGuire, who's going, and he couldn't breathe and people are witnessing it, they said, well, we're going to do a little experiment. We're going to try these 3 drugs. Because you got no way of testing. Anybody want to volunteer for this? You got no way of testing, so you have to experiment in the killing of people. And then that's what happened. That's what happened with this man Lockett. And here's the key thing to notice in that scene. When it was going all wrong and they were frantic, what did they do? The few witnesses that were there, they closed the curtains. You're not supposed to see this part. It's not going right. We want you to see when it's a seemly death. When there he is stretched on the gurney and now we're ready to do it. In Louisiana, they open a curtain. There he is, stretched out. Now you can, just the few witnesses. And you know why I wrote this book? And you know why I'm standing before you here in Des Moines today? Is because my eyes saw it. I was brought there. In fact, in the prequel, in the preface in my book, River of Fire, about my spiritual journey, it's going to begin with this. They killed a man with fire one night. They strapped him in a wooden chair and pumped electricity through his body until he was dead. His killing was a legal act because he had killed. No religious leaders protested the killing that night, but I was there, and I saw it with my own eyes. And what I saw set my soul on fire, a fire that burns in me still. And now here is an account of this, what brought me to the killing chamber that night and the spiritual currents that pulled me there. What the opera is going to do for all of us is to bring us in the deepest of all encounters with this. And we're going to be struggling in our own hearts with it, but through drama and through music, and it's going to bring us there. Yes.
Got one here, and we've got one more question.
Okay. Our comment, open for comments. What do you think?
Hi, Sister Helen. My name is Brendan Dunphy. I'm a local actor here in Iowa. Like you, I grew up in East Baton Rouge Parish, right down the road in Zachary. Yep, you bet. Louisiana boy at heart, even though my home's been Iowa for about 22 years. I'm here tonight.
Well, sir.
Say it again, sorry?
You chose well, sir.
Indeed, indeed. Good upbringing. Good schools down there, too. I'm here tonight because I was asked recently to be an actor in this opera for the Des Moines Metro Opera. Never done an opera before. In fact, I've been on a hiatus from theater for a couple of years so I could focus on TV and film and music, rock music, actually. So it's a cool coincidence to hear that this has a lot of rock in it.
Well, some rock.
Some rock, okay. We have expectations, right? So, Michael, I don't know where you are, but I'll do the play. Sister Helen definitely sold me on it. I guess, so they've got me to be not one of the opera singers, but one of the guys in the beginning, one of the brothers, the Desrochers brothers. So pardon my naivete about what exactly is fiction and what is real so far, because I'm relatively new to this story and don't know.
It's a true story. Don't get mixed up in that fiction and real.
All right. Good to know. So Anthony DeRoche.
You're Anthony, yeah.
Anthony, yes.
So you're one of the ones who helps him kill?
Yeah, right. So
No, I mean, that's a horrendous thing to do.
yes,
Horrendous
yeah.
for you.
Yeah, they get me to do all the dark and weird stuff around here. So that's, I guess what I'm wondering is if you could, what you can recollect, if you would, if you have any interest or inclination to, about what you learned about the moment, about maybe motivations. Now, as an actor, I'm not a method actor like a lot are, but...
Don't bring us too deep now. Don't bring us too deep.
No, I'm right there with you. In fact, that's why I asked
Okay,
it, is
so the
for the little
question
shred
is-
of that I do have, and for the sake of mere curiosity, what can you tell me about what went on there? I mean, saying one thing led to another.
Here's the situation, and so many murders happen this way. Here are two brothers, and the story will be revealed of what really set Joe DeRoche off, so that he's out there, well, let's go see, they have kids there that make out, and then that leads to the rape. And something happens in that situation, and he loses control, and he shoots, and he kills. The warden of the penitentiary in Louisiana told me, sister, you know who makes the best trustees in the prison? Are people who come in for murder. When they got up in the morning, they didn't know they were going to kill anybody, but they get in situations. It's something that goes on. There's passion involved. If you're on drugs or you're drinking, if you got a gun in your hand, all these things happen. And then the killing happens. And he is responsible for doing it. But it's currents. It's currents in the river, an eddy. And you get in that eddy, and then you're going with the current and going with the current. And you're in an emotional state where you're highly volatile, and you got a gun in your hands. And that's how it happens. Mr. Actor, where have you gone? But I'm going to tell you, one of the hard things, like the first person who was Joseph DeRoche in opera was John Packard. And he really had to work with the drama coach to be Joseph DeRoche. He was used to being a singer and singing nice stuff. He's, singing the Our Father with groups and all. And he's got to be a killer man. He's got to be this hard man. And the drama coach really had to work with him because he didn't like this guy. Who wants to be this guy? And it's going to be hard for you because you're going to get in it and you have to do this. You got to get inside the skin and life. Susan Sarandon calls the vocation of acting enforced compassion. So you're going to get inside the skin and life, and that moment that gets taken over, and you're going to do something unspeakably terrible. And you got to go there for us and really be there for us. And it's not easy to do because you have to empty yourself out to do this and really become this. And we thank you for doing that. It's going to be a stretch for you. It's going to be a challenge for you to do this so that you're not just acting it out, but you're not really killing anybody. You're not really there. And so thank you. Somebody else?
That's our last question here.
You mentioned the drugs that are used in execution. Last month, the Unitarian Church here showed a film about aid in dying that they have in Oregon. And those people who wish to end their lives, they have a pill that's dissolved in water, and they drink it, and they peacefully drift away. And I don't support the death penalty, but if they're going to do it, do you know what is the reason that it can't be done like that?
Well, no, that's such an honest, good question. It really is. Look where we came from, folks. We started with hanging, but hanging, you got to get that knot in the noose exactly in a special place in the back of the neck back here. And they had some things that kind of went awry. People are twisting and gasping, and that's hard to watch. So we said, we got to move to a quick, humane way that's going to end this. And so they had the electric chair. And I was in Florida when Jesse Tafaro was executed in Florida, and his head caught on fire. The sponge wasn't right in the thing for the, and he caught on fire. So electrocution, well, that's not too good. So let's go to the ultimate humane way. I mean, they put alcohol on the arm of the man. That's how good we are in America. We're going to do this in a humane way. No kidding, no kidding. And so we turn to the medicinal way. There's a clean sheet on the gurney. You can't get away from the cruciform shape of the gurney because both arms are stretched out. And that has some resonance in it for some of us. There is no humane way, even if you find a perfect pill and all you do is drink it and drift away. Because of your mind. When the torture memos came out during the Bush administration, when Alberto Gonzales were trying to get around the Geneva Conventions with the people they had captured and had in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, and what constituted torture. And here you have the Geneva Conventions that said we're supposed to treat prisoners of war in a humane way and not suffer cruel and degrading punishment. How are you going to get around that? Because we got all these people now. And first thing, what you do is you do something legal. You change the wording. And they said, oh, well, these are not prisoners of war. These are enemy combatants. And we can do anything to them. There's the most chilling interview of Justice Scalia with the BBC about what we can do to people to get information out of them that could maybe save a city. And basically he was saying, oh, it's not against the Eighth Amendment, a cruel and unusual punishment. Well, you understand, it's not punishment. There hadn't been a trial. They're not convicted. It's getting information from them. It's not punishment. And, of course, the BBC, England, is a little bit more developed in this than we are. And the BBC person, you could tell, was just shocked. They said, well, Justice Scalia, could you do anything? He said, yeah, you can do anything. You can, you know, drive bamboo shoots under fingernails, do what you need to do to get the information. And that's why when these discussions happen around these executions, you're going to have people that write a letter to the editor, say they're supposed to suffer pain for what they do. What do you mean about making this humane, that we're going to have this magic pill? That's never going to happen. And it's also never going to be public. There have been 3 times they've tried to bring it to the courts to say, we ought to be able to see this and witness this. And irony of ironies, even the 12 people witnessing Clayton Lockett's execution, when things started going wrong, they closed the curtain, even for the 12. And that's why I wrote this book, and that's why I go and speak to the American public, to bring people close. Because I'll tell you this, we could end with this perhaps, unless you got more, yeah. One more? Y'all keep saying one more. I know what you're doing. All right. 1 + 1, like it's an algebraic thing.
Sister, thank you for being here. I've been thinking about these questions all day. I still don't think I have a good version of either one of them. But here goes. First of all, for people that have had a change of heart, what argument or rationale was it that made them sort of switch sides? And then secondly, what role how has your Catholicism affected maybe your argument as far as with people that aren't religious?
Sure. And human rights is the road for everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Amnesty was my first teacher before my church was my teacher. And they taught me about human rights. And human rights are inalienable to us because we're human. They're not given by governments to people for good behavior, and they can't be taken away for bad behavior. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Eleanor Roosevelt was instrumental in bringing it to be in 1948 after the atrocities of what had happened in Germany. Article 3, everyone has a right to life. There are no exceptions to that, except for those who've been condemned for crimes. And Article 5, no one should be subjected to cruel and degrading punishment and torture. My Catholicism, which is my Christianity, which is being rooted in the passion and life of Jesus, brings me to poor people, brings me to justice, brings me to transforming society, brings me to saying, oh, that's so sad that it has to change. And real spirituality, I believe, brings us to resistance, brings us to action, brings us to, as a society, saying, wait, we don't have to stay here. We can go to a better place, and being engaged in that transformation. So the social justice teachings of the Catholic Church have always been a part of it. But it took me a long time. It's called the best kept secret in the Catholic Church. Now, Pope Francis is changing that. I mean, Pope Francis, I mean, God, what a miracle in the Catholic Church that he happened. I mean, really. I was giving a talk at the law school at LSU, and so students were lined up to get their book signed, so there was a nice-sized little line, and so one of the students, she said, hey, sister, I'm on my Twitter, I'm getting Pope Francis for the day. You want to hear his thought for the day? Here's this law student Twittering the Pope to get his thought. Because he's real, and he's human, and he's pastoral, and not the doctrine above all, and you better fit in the wedge, or you don't belong, but people and their needs, about gay people. Who am I to judge? Oh, my God. He put everybody on their ear. Who am I to judge? Well, of course we're supposed to judge. And what's the doctrine that they have in the church about gay people? I mean, honestly, ride the wave. It's really interesting, and I couldn't be happier that miracles can happen. It just happens among us, then suddenly, boom, a Francis appears. Or, you know, a person appears who's a decent, good politician who really works for the good of the people and justice for all, and inclusion, that everybody gets to sit at the table. And it's in us, and it's all in all of us. So ultimately, it's about our participation in the society in which we participate to help bring us all to a greater society of compassion, goodness, and it's a scandal that we have 47 million people who continue to live in poverty. We have accepted that. Well, they're just poor people and whatever. That's a scandal in the richest country in the world. And so when I get in these universities and talking with these young people, and I'm just saying to them, you're it. And you get in there and you dig into this stuff and understand it. And please God, your little boat is going to catch a wave of passion, and it's going to carry you for the rest of your life to give yourself over to something much bigger than you've ever been involved in before. So thank you very much. I'll see you at the book.